Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to assemble a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world, one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I'm mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 42, Naming Your Traits, the Next Level. We've been playing for a few days with the idea of determining your own character profile. This could be for a character, a fiction character that you're creating, or if you want to play around with your own self, using you as though you were a fictional character and coming up with your character profile. We began through a few exercises of writing little scenarios that attempted to capture the different character traits by means of a story. How did they show up in your life? And now we're in the second phase where we're working through a set of questions to determine if we can name the character trait that we have described in our story. So yesterday we broke all of our little stories. We have a stack of them now on file cards, and you can look back at the last few episodes if you didn't create your cards. But we're taking those stacks of stories and we're starting to classify them and break them down so that we can name the character trait. Yesterday, we went through all of our stories and broke them down by groups, 4 different main groups. And they were the resilience group, the balance group, the insight group, and the empathy group. Today, we're going to take those larger groups and break them down into smaller groups. And then our next step after that will be reaching the character trait itself. So we're going to work through each of the groups individually to break them down to their subgroups. Our first group that we will break into subgroups is the resilience group. The resilience group we arrived at when the story on our card was about the character or you confronting the physical world. It was something outside of you, outside of the character, but it wasn't another person. It was something about the world or a problem or an obstacle, something external. Today we're going to do a little bit of refinement. We're going to take each one of those stories that you labeled as being about the physical world, a resilience problem. Now we're going to break those down into 2 categories. Is it you facing the world, fighting against the world? Or is it you on top of the world, getting there, achieving something outside of yourself that's material or physical? So those are the 2 categories that we will break those stories down. So now the cards that fit that group should say resilience, courage, or resilience, power. And that's how we will make the next level of breakdown for the issues of confronting the physical world. The next group that we'll look at has to do with issues of managing and assessing ourselves, or our character managing or assessing himself. This is the group when the issue was, how do I handle myself? How do I live comfortably within my own self? Then you're dealing with a balance trait. And the balance traits can be broken down into 3 different subgroups. The first subgroup choice is self-regulation, when your character is struggling with controlling himself, getting himself to do what he wants himself to do. So the struggle is self against self. those stories belong to the self-regulation subgroup of the balance group. The next group that we'll look at is the attention group. Is the issue getting or giving attention? Two sides of attention, but they belong to the same subgroup. Is the character needing affirmation from the outside world, wanting to have their self-esteem elevated by the outside world? Or maybe the character is very devoted and giving to someone in the outside world, very giving of attention. So the third subgroup in that balance group is the self-assessment group. Is the issue correctly understanding the self? Coming to a correct judgment about strengths and abilities, and coming to awareness without ducking the information or being dominated by the information. So if it's about self-judgment or self-awareness, that would be in that subgroup. So now your stories that was the issue of managing yourself, the balance group might be broken down into 3 categories: self-regulation, control, attention, or self-assessment. The next group we'll look at is kind of the oddball of these groups, because this group only has one subgroup. So we're not really breaking anything down, but we'll still catalog the name of the subgroup. This was when the issue was the character or your ability to be aware of surroundings, observation, and this has the one subgroup which is named the wisdom subgroup, and it has to do with good judgment, which of course all of the characters in the insight group have to do with coming to right judgments about the world. Our final category that we're going to break down had to do with when our story had to do about relationships. That's the most common of all types of stories, and it's the most populated group of character traits that there are. We call that the empathy group. The group as a whole is called the empathy group, and that can be broken down into one of 4 subgroups. If the issue is your character's ability to be counted on when the chips are down, will your character come through? That's the dependability subgroup. When the question is, how pleasant or comfortable is it to be around your character? Why, that's the sociability subgroup. When the issue has to do with the character navigating asymmetrical relationships where the character is the underdog and there's another one entity or person in authority over the character, that's a subgroup we'll call the honor subgroup. And finally, the last subgroup is sort of the everything else subgroup. If your story isn't about your character being dependable, and it isn't about him being sociable, and it isn't about asymmetrical relationships, maybe it has to do with how the character responds to what is coming into his life. And that, especially the good things in life. How does the character return a response when good things come along? And that's a special category all unto itself. So you might want to consider that, because in reality that you might think that it belongs in one of the other subgroups, but it's really a subgroup all to itself if you think about it. So tomorrow we'll begin breaking the subgroups down to individual character traits. So I hope you'll enjoy me then. Bye-bye.